We are still following Soren Kierkegaard's life journey, and we are in the we are in the 1940s, actually, in the beginning of the 1940s, where he in 1941 had to explain for his love in life, Regina Olsen, that he couldn't continue, and she held on to him, and he really couldn't anything else but say no to her. And there is a quotation from his meeting with her father, because she kept that late September in 1841 getting back at him that he shouldn't let go of her, and he shouldn't take things such and such. He should just stay in the relationship, but he really couldn't. And so he left her actually crying, because he had to tell her in a way where he had to shout at her in a way, as he expressed himself. It was the only thing to do, and I could do, to make her really and fully understand. And after that, he went to the theater to maybe get some kind of his head around something else. But well, in the break, her father, that Itazzo, the guy who had this position in the state, driving the finances, he seeked him out. And you know, the theater can be of interluding, have interludes where you can wait for some time, have refreshment and drinks and so on. And so he caught him in the break there and told him that you have left my daughter crying and totally out of herself. You cannot do that to her, and you cannot do that to me. I am a proud man, and this is hard. I beg you, do not break up with her. But he said to him, I will bring her to her mind again, but the thing is already decided. And so he held on to his decision as he did. And later he wrote to his friend, I need to get away from this. And he chose to go to Berlin. Berlin was at that time somewhat close, but far away. It was also a long journey out there, but one of the closer destinations where you could find philosophers and thinkers, as we will come back to. And so he had in his mind, when he went to Berlin, to try and forget about all this, and at the same time shelter himself, because he knew he's going to be seen as the crook, the guy who left that very fine lady and her family with a broken heart. And so he would be by the elite and the cultural elite in Copenhagen, be seen as the guy who was up to no good and has been misusing the family and the girl. So little Copenhagen couldn't provide him enough shelter from that, so he had to go away. And he kept writing to his only friend, Emil Boasen, at that time, and he said to him in one letter in December 14th, 1841, well, that the family hates me is okay. I have made that possible, and maybe that she also should be able to hate me. So it's like he's doing this on purpose. And later he writes, well, to marry myself, I don't have time for. Here in Berlin, there is a singer, a Demoiselle Schulz, and I like her. She played Elvira in Mozart Ebert Don Juan, and there's nothing lost in her, and I like her, and that could be also some kind of good enjoyment when I'm tired of speculating or thinking on this and that. And so later on, earlier on, in his other letters, he say later on, in Berlin, he says to him, to his friend and to himself, well, it is heavy to have made a human being so unhappy and heavy, and I have done it and that I have done her unhappy is maybe the only hope I had to make her happy. So you can see it's a kind of double edge, as we talked about in the last video, that it is something he thought he had to do. He just couldn't go on with this relationship, even though he loved her a lot. And he asked his friend Emil Boasen to keep getting his messages about her. He wanted news and what's going on with her and what happened to her. Well, what happened to her was that he actually got somewhat happy. She never forgot him either, because she talked about him in her diaries as well, but in her memories later. But she went on to marry a guy that she liked, that guy Fritz Schiegel, and he took her to the West Indian islands, and she didn't get kids just like him, but he um, he actually followed her news, and she from time to time also followed his. And so, in a way, he stayed with her forever, and the same did she. And that's why he keeps getting us back to her and writing about her in his notes. But, well, she got on with her life. She got married and lived until she became 82 years old, died in 1904, so much later than him. He had only a few years to live, but she had her life going on. At the same period, he published his book about irony. It's a strange book to talk about, and maybe one day I will just chirp through it and talk about it in more details, since I have the whole series of his books given to me by a near friend and a close partner in conversation, and a person I really hold very dear. And so he published that book about the irony and what it meant. And I have to explain a little bit that it is not about the irony as we understand it. It's like not just giving examples of irony and how it's used in daily life. It is more, as we know, a philosopher who's going up to the higher layers of the sphere and looking down at life and the words in it. So it's a bit abstract, maybe a lot abstract. But at the same time, if you catch the thread in it, you will understand what it's about. Basically, the book from 1841 is discussing whether irony is a good thing, is an uplifting case for the humans or not. And he had on one side the philosopher Hegel criticizing these romantics at his time, people who only understood reality from their own personality and their own sensing. And they used it a lot as a way of saying you cannot understand anything rationally. It all has to come from how you experience it in the inside. And irony became one of these things they used to make things feel less important or put focus on it in a negative way. And he had these people on one side, then Hegel on one side criticizing these people. Then he had these romantics on the other side, which he partly belonged to because he was also much attached to his own feelings and understanding of it. And they didn't satisfy him either, because he could see the negativity and the troubles using the irony in the way they are. And on the third hand, he went back all the way back to Socrates and used him as an example of a human who in a way used conversation and irony and turning things around. Irony is like when you say things the opposite way than they should be, or look at something in a totally different manner that doesn't make sense and just make it laughable, or make it look very unimportant and with no meaning at all. It's like breaking down reality's meaning and seriousity in some ways, or maybe attacking some people for traits they have in them, making fun and jokes out of it. So it's a kind of sarcasm, but not sarcasm. This is clear in his word that he distinguished that from sarcasm, because sarcasm is out to laugh at someone, while irony is out laughing at yourself or with yourself at someone else's way of being, without like being sarcastic. It's like laughing at life and saying, well, does it really look like that? Is it so and so? And in that way, he tried to distinguish the ideas and talk in length about the negativity of the irony, and then goes back to help Socrates to say, well, Socrates was not just ironic to be ironic. For him, it was not just to make things disappear or seem unimportant. He had a very serious mission. He wanted people to turn their heads around the things they thought was very important, or the way they looked at themselves, and maybe not take themselves so seriously as they should. And so the irony of Socrates was momentarily. It was an irony that was meant to help people feed a thought and give birth to a new way of understanding themselves. So he had a very positive way of explaining this around Socrates, and he's using very beautiful words. This was a what you call a disputat, something you give into the university to become a magister, to become an educated man with papers on it. So he distinguished between that doubting, asking, ironic way of speaking, and that one that leads you to um, boredom, lead you to think to say that things have no importance at all. Nothing has importance anymore. It's all a funny joke. Everything is a kind of a joke. Everything can be laughed at, and nothing is really of any value in itself. So he had to navigate between these three positions. The Hegel, who was a harsh critic of both Socrates and the group of romantics. The Romanticism was a kind of a movement in that time in opposition to rationalism, where everything should be from the outside world inward. And that made them turn to the inside world as the basis for any comprehension and understanding. And so he tried to navigate between that and used Socrates in great length in this book and gave a lot of expressions about him and talks. It was like, if you want to understand something about Socrates, you can also go to his book, because it's like kind of also a look into Socrates' life and his wife and the way he went about talking to people. And it was a lot from that Greek mythology that also was part of what he was saying. So basically, he say irony is not only negativity and distancing yourself, but also a way to get in clinch with reality. It is like a kind of controlled moment where it doesn't run in its own lanes, going in all directions, and become the absolute way of like making fun of reality. It is to make reality real. It is kind of a way that wants to engage the persons in a tempered way to understand reality. And what better way to do so than to turn it around? Like Socrates could make fun of himself, he knew a lot, and he could go into a crowd and say, listen, I really don't know anything. Can any of you help me with understanding how the earth is doing this and that, and how whether the rain is falling, or whatever he want to talk about? Anyone knows about how to drive a carriage, and so on. He could use all these pictures, but people could look at him and say, well, doesn't he know? We know he knows, and why is he pretending not to know? And this is what irony is about. It's like sometimes a pretension that you cannot, or you don't know, and you're not able to. And so in that way, it becomes the expression of the opposite of the person's real abilities, or an expression of something in reality that you give another sense and meaning to than the one that has been the promoted and understood one. It's like talking to an animal and giving it the status of a big Senate member, or maybe a leader, and making fun out of that situation is a way also making fun of the senator or the leader, if you're using him as an example, or his position as an example. It doesn't need to be the name. And so people know that animals are not in the Senate and cannot talk, cannot make politics. And so when you go and talk to a horse about this, or a mule or something, you are making fun. It can be sarcastic, but if you're not going after the person, you are just putting the whole life situation into an ironic way of, look at this animal. Is that much better in understanding what I'm saying that the people who really are running the show, something like that. So it becomes also part of bringing things to light that really are enjoyable for people, because suddenly they become aware of seeing things in a different way than the reality has told them to see it in. So he ends up like defending both Socrates and saying that irony is this kind of momentum you use to get around things. And he, of course, got good reviews on this book, and some people criticized him not being academic enough, and others said, well, it was too stiff in his way of writing, and that's how typically life is. Whenever somebody says or writes or do anything, there is someone who can see it in the measures of too much or too little. And maybe it is too much and too little, but depends on where you're standing and who is viewing, and this is something that wasn't really in the time. But anyhow, after that disputat, he couldn't really stay in Denmark, in Copenhagen, because he wanted to get away from that very tough time and hard situation with his love of life. He really wanted that girl, and he couldn't. There was something in him that he couldn't. And I tried to explain my view on it in the last talk, that it was maybe because he was that philosopher who couldn't give time to both big projects, and so he ran away from it all. And it could be something more in both his personality, abilities, and maybe that guilt feeling. We know that guilt can give a person a huge amount of pessimism and negativity. It can take away the vitality of life as well, because you sit thinking about the punishment that you have distracted yourself. And if you do not think about your guilt, you are in an even worse shape, like in our times today, where people seldomly go back and look at their they want to get rid of the guilt altogether, and by trying to do so, they bury it in a place where it goes in and hurt them totally. They will lose the empathy, connection with themselves, and become people who are just wanderers, zombies, because they will be ready to do a lot of things they shouldn't have. Guilt is an important way of keeping humans human and keeping people in touch. But when the guilt is too hard, well, it becomes also part of what can put you down. So whatever it is that made him run away from her and run to Berlin, he was also following another course in Berlin, that is meeting with the great philosophers down there. And he knew they had a big theater where he could hear Mozart's operas, and he could follow the latest trend in philosophy. So he wanted to be there for a year or a year and a half, living in Berlin. And so he did. He took the boat and he went there, and he tried to meet with some of the known philosophers at that time. Some of these who are mentioned are Henrik Steffens, Philip Conrad Marnike, and Karl Werder. I do not know a lot about them or what they have been writing, but the last one, Friedrich Schilling, is a known figure for his so-called speculative idealism, and he made a lasting imprint also on the Scandinavian lifestyle and way of thinking at that time. So his ideas were like close to the old Platonic Socratic way of thinking, just in a new form and model. And some of his students were Michael Bakunin and Friedrich Engels, these people who had something to do with revolution and Marx's way of thinking. And so Kierkegaard was very fascinated by Schelling and was happy to have heard him talk for several times. And he writes back home to one of his old teachers, the pastor Spang, that he says, well, Schelling is, in his looking, not really that important a person to look at, but when he speaks, I'm so glad that I've heard him, because he can really give you the one idea about reality after the other. And that word about reality kicked a lot of power and energy in him to start writing how and why he wrote the way he wrote later. And so he says that when he speaks about the world reality and the philosophy's relation to reality in it, it's like it gives me fosters of thoughts like Elizabeth, that woman in the Old Testament who Zacharias' wife, who couldn't get kids, and then asked God for a miracle, and then she got Johannes the Baptist himself. So she was the mother of Johannes the Baptist. And so he was comparing the birth of thoughts and the happiness and joy that brought in him time after time, like this old woman who couldn't get kids, and suddenly God listens to her voice and grants her this very special kid. And so for him it was a big thing, really. And he came like every time out with his head full of ideas that he wanted to write and talk and understand reality. And a whole universe opened up for him in that period. And so he started putting notes together and listening, and of course still going to the opera and taking walks in the streets of Berlin. He went to live in a place when he arrived, in a place called Hotel Mittelstrasse, but later moved to Jägerstrasse. And in Jägerstrasse one can still find small bronze plate showing that it was the place where he lived. It was close to both the theater and under the Linden, the place where people used to walk, and close to the Friedrich Wilhelms University that later became Humboldt University, called after that philosopher. And so he went to a lot of listening and walking and um, listening to the opera, the same thing as in Copenhagen, but in broader aspect, and uh, with new people in it. And so he wanted to write, and he wanted to write badly. And so between these three, like a triad of opera and walks, meeting people, and then listening to philosophers, he and writing back home to his friend Emil Boasen or somebody close to him, well, he got fostered so much with ideas that he gave birth to one of his real big classic works called Either Or, from 1843, and that was a big work he had to give to the world. It is a classic in Danish literature and some other places as well, something that people still look into, and it's built up around pseudonyms. He started really using the theatrical in his work there by giving pseudonyms names. They could talk. There is a guy called Victor Eremitus who finds a group of paper in his desk. One set of paper is from A's papers, and then he talks a lot about his views on the world and marriage and people and so on. Then he finds the view of B, and they are totally different, and he tries to make sense of it all. So this book becomes a kind of central cornerstone in his literature work and in his life as well. And it's the book that puts him truly on the scene as that philosopher and thinker in many ways, because he uses, I think, everything that he had gotten in him at that time. And so after reading A and B, he stands as the C. There is a C person as well. And it all goes around the theme of becoming real. Becoming yourself, becoming real, becoming a person in reality. Do you really exist? And what is it to exist truly? How do you really enter existence, and how do you feel it in your way? And this is what's going on in this book, and this is the talks that he have. And so that type A of person is a kind of happy, joyful, ununderstanding existence. His identity and personality is just on the surface. Everything around him just gives him a very shallow pleasantry. It's like everything is okay, as it should be. There is nothing wrong. He is in that existence without really being so much aware of it. It's like a guy walking in his sleep through reality and through life. And well, he doesn't never ever become something special or important or get to find that uniqueness in him. He will just become one with everything around him and just follow the trends. And in many ways, he's showing us the personality of most people living through life without really taking that look deeper inside anything else than themselves. And so he starts giving names to these characters that he's giving the name of A's paper. A is not the aesthetiker per se himself, but he's describing that life that many people are living, and he ends up calling them, well, this is the person living on the shallow. But whenever you start looking at yourself just a little bit deeper and enjoying life, you become that sensual person, the aesthetic, the person who can enjoy beauty and things around you and live in it and understand the difference between what's in and what's out, what's beautiful and what's not. And so in that way, he becomes a part of that reality that is surrounding him with some kind of passion, but without really being aware of the deepest side of himself. So he's starting to make nuances here in this very difficult book to read, and maybe I will take a talk on it on its own later. I'm just giving some small highlights in this quick fashion, because it's important to understand that he's trying to take us along a journey on many faces and facets in people's life, but especially the faces, the different way of being aesthetic. How can that be? That can be, well, by being sensual erotic, and another one can be sensual musical. And so there are relations that shifts inward and outward, and life becomes some kind of observation more than lived life. It's like looking yourself into the mirror and whether you can accept yourself or not. And in that place, there are many kind of aesthetic people and aesthetic moods, as he liked to talk about in length in that book as well. And he's very much circling around the idea of passion, that this is what's missing in people's life. They are living and maybe enjoying, but they do not have the deep passion for what they are doing. They are not indulging themselves in reality so they can appear in it. They can become true to themselves and life in that deep passion. He sees his time, that it is a time lacking all these deeper passions. And well, he says that these kind of persons, well, they are, especially the aesthetics, they are just from one sensual experience to the other without really digging into deep in what it means and the depth of it and the beauty of every single thing that it is. And so it's like a person who is jaywalking but sometimes dreaming. It's like a person who sleeps in life, but the dreams bring him some kind of reality closer to himself. And it's a way of sometimes saying it's a way of sheltering yourself from that boredom that makes you look into yourself. So while that person on the surface just walking around like a jaywalker, a person who is asleep but just walking through life without really realizing what it is he is or what he's doing in it, you have that aesthetic who's really facing himself either with a kind of beautiful look or maybe somehow frustrated look at it, but there is some kind of enjoyment underneath the surface and a contact with reality that is deeper, and it comes to life in many different ways. But in the end, it's like this kind of persons are protecting themselves, from that boredom that will come if you do not keep running around filling your life with new intense experiences every time there is a break. And the bombardment of the senses, it stops. There will be a big hole that you do not know what to do about, and you are not really capable of looking into it. So it's about driving that boredom or moment of pausing away, and so you will go in different directions. But when the hole appears, and when all this sensuality stops, it will hurt. And when it hurts, it can lead to kind of melancholy, depression, and it can lead to a way of trying to filling that gap out. And people suddenly realize after the sensuality is gone that life becomes more meaningless, or it doesn't really make that deep sense anymore as they thought it was. And in that way, well, they develop a kind of life that is between the sensuality and the regret. Life becomes a big regret for them because they have really accomplished nothing but just being these aesthetics that have been on these wild projects of this and that, and turning themselves in all directions but inward, and but looking in themselves and only looking at life in the way of what gives pleasure all the time, and never giving that break to anything that could go deeper. And so he describes these kind of people saying, well, those who are not really bored, they are boring for others. And those who are bored, they are entertaining others. And those who are not bored are in the usual fashion those that in one or other way are busy in the world while they are becoming the most boring and what can you say, this distancing people. And so it's all like in his these are the melon plays he have in this bit either or, where he's talking about the stages of understanding life's reality, and stepping forward as you are, as who you are. And that's why he says here that it is a kind of it's also a kind of irony that is held in this position, because you are trying to use everything you can to shield yourself from yourself, and at the same time, by using irony and distancing yourself, making everything look cool and negative and not so important, you are in a way also shaken inside you, and you are really busy not to become that meaningless thing that you are afraid of. And so it's like a person who can move a bit to the side, or just make runs forward and backwards, inside and outwards, but without really realizing anything. And I think this is beautiful in many ways. He give it a lot of description. He says, well, these people that have these troubles between irony and that kind of melancholy or depression, and not really able to take hold on themselves in life, it's like if a clown came into the scene and told people there is fire in the curtains of the theater, please go out, and he's rushing people to go out, and they all started applauding and laughing for the beautiful performance, even though he is very funny. It is true, he's telling them that the theater is really on fire, but they take it as an act, and they do not really look into the direction or source of the fire. And so this is a kind of life that he describes, maybe that could be very useful for people that wants to have an eye-opener on how they are really living. And really many people maybe need to read this in maybe a little easier way, and perhaps there should be easier ways to present this, so it doesn't become so philosophical and entangled in all these kind of talks that people give and disappears. And this is what happens from time to time, where you make people aware of life, like Socrates he did, and maybe turning them to look at some places they didn't want to at the same time. And everything for him is at the same time also some kind of non-realization. They're not really getting to where they should. And he says in one place, ending this the Psalmata there, the middle place of this story, he says, well, marry yourself and you will regret it. Don't marry and you will regret it. Marry or don't marry, you will regret both. Whether you marry or you don't marry, you will still keep regretting both of them. Laugh of the world's funny stuff and craziness, and you will forget it. Cry over them, and you will regret them. Whether you laugh or cry over the world's ways, you will regret both. Either you laugh of the world or you cry over them, you will still regret both. And so he keeps on like this. Even he gets to hang yourself, you'll regret it. Don't hang yourself, you'll also regret it. Whether you hang yourself or you don't hang yourself, you'll regret it. You will regret it. And whether you regret, you don't regret it, you will regret both. This is what is my life wisdom is all about. And still, it's not him speaking. He's letting this person who found the papers talk, explaining what he found in his drawers of this explanation that comes from this pseudonym, the person who really wanted to explain what he has seen in life. And he's very true to this aesthetic way of life, because he actually describes in details what this aesthetic would like people to do. And he tells them very clearly that, well, he thinks that God created all this because of boredom. And so he created Adam, and Adam was also bored, and so he created Eve, and Eve and Adam got bored, and so they had the conversation with the snake, and later they had these kids who could not go along, and so they fought, and the family became too many families, and the mass became the people had a lot of boredom, and so not to have that boredom, they built a tower, and in that tower they could live, but then they got also bored in there, and so they left each other from there. So being bored and doing nothing is the root for all evils. Well, that could be, he says, and that's why this aesthetic he's talking now in behalf of, is saying, well, that's why take very good care not to marry and not to get into a straight relation, because you will sooner or later get bored with that, and just keep flying around like a bee getting nectar, kissing and going around without really binding yourself, because in that way you will keep the thrill and the joy, and do not go speaking about the only one. There is more that will bore you to death in your place, and run into these kind of escapades that you can to survive the boredom, because friendship and marriage and unions and people going together in groups will be the death of you, because it will all lead to some kind of routinized way of doing things, and you will hang with your friends. They will just stay there forever. Whenever the boredom is there, you cannot get rid of them. And the same with marriage. So go try to get yourself out of your situation by forgetting, by sensually remembering, and by that creative going by of staging yourself all the time. The most beautiful part, like of a relationship, is for many people on this level, the aesthetics. It's where they are flirting and writing and saying things, and the feelings are thrilling. And when everything settles down, well, it's a new stage, but they cannot make themselves go with that new stage. It becomes boredom. It becomes like losing that sensuality, and so they have to keep stuck in that loop of life that they go about doing again and again and again, and staying in, all so to keep that big hole in themselves, understanding and looking, keeping that in a distance, far away. And this is a long talk, of course, trying to make it short and a bit fragmented, but maybe it will just give an idea of what it is he's talking about. And so he continues. In the book of A's paper, he's speaking about that kind of aesthetic person who is in love with the love itself, and likes the play for the play itself, and so he's more attached to what it gives him of thrill than the effect of it. It's not the other person or thing he's gonna reach out to, and it's a kind of narcissistic traits that we are seeing here. These persons who are so self-indulgent and only seeking pleasure after pleasure, and whenever it fades out, they go and seek it in a new way, and leaving a lot of unfinished stuff on their way, and keep getting back to that. And he gives several examples of that, whether they seek it erotically or musically, or they seek it very hard and trying to satisfy themselves with it or not. And so he let this guy, the person who is speaking in these A's papers, that we can call the seducer. He calls him Johannes the seducer, Johannes Forføreren på dansk, or he's the character of that hedonistic person, narcissistic hedonistic person, because he's always seeking the pleasure for the pleasure itself, and filling out that void of really looking into life and himself, and keep everything interesting by doing all these things that we have been talking about. And so he describes in big length these issues, using probably himself, his own life, and the people around him, the people he has met. And it's like his journeys into people's life, and in different ways, also his love story and other things that he has met on his way, the meeting with different kind of people, the things he experienced on his own body, all became that kind of that dough, that literature, that experience mass that he made out in this. But he couldn't have done it without going to Berlin, we think. I don't know, but it seems so. He had to listen to these philosophers. He had to walk in a new place, and he had to gather it all in his mind. It had to mature inside him, so he could describe it in some length and very true to the human nature. And this is maybe what makes his effect lasting, that he struck some chords on the human nature, and how people can reflect on themselves, that seems very accurate. And people will, reading it even today, will say, wow, that's me in that age, or that's this and that person I know, or that's exactly how I've been thinking. So he had really encompassed a lot in these ways of explaining things. Well, that was only the first part, because the aesthetic person is met also by the ethic person who lives on the traditions. And this is a whole talk on itself. And then there is the person who will look into life from a total different way. Maybe I should give a small explanation on that as well. Now I have started this. And basically, as you can guess, papers B are just as long as papers A. So the first person who is talking about living life in that sensuality is opposed now by the person number 2. And it's all the papers that's in the hand of Victor Eremita, the guy who's reading these papers and telling us about it in the book. So we have several layers of personalities here. We have this person A who wrote his diaries, and then he has person B who wrote his diaries about life, and they are actually opposed to the first one. This is the guy called the etiquer, the ethical person who lives according to duty, and love for him is not that flanking around with sensual enjoyment on the surface. That doesn't lead anywhere, he says. And so he goes on in that paper, like arguing with his friend. It's like the first one has written his papers who were read by number two, and number two is now giving him back, explaining for him why what he's doing is wrong and what will happen in his life. Well, your life will go up in and just running to live. You will just be chasing life and not really living it. And you will be living by abuse and by something that's not yours, and you will steal others' happiness from them. So this guy, the number B, is the first one was called Johannes the seducer, Johannes the seducer, and this guy is called Wilhelm the assessor. The assessor is like kind of person who judges and have this position in society. And so this guy explains himself in Papers B that he is happily married with his wife. He had love story to her, his only love, and he is the person of order and tradition. We can see it in our heads that how he's living this ethical picture of following everything that seems right and true. And so his life has just become that small citizen life, as Kierkegaard would tell about it. And he just becomes just like that shallow person on the surface, living things without really indulging in them. And so we can think for ourselves, how much does he have an advantage over that aesthetic who's going and trying to at least get some joys out of the layers that's just behind the surface of life by getting all what he wants of sensuality. But this guy, he says, this is no good, and you will never be totally satisfied by living on that surface and putting all kind of seasoning in your life to make it smell better and be better and go around and trying to get all the new things all the time. You have to settle down and let the love lead you to that companionship that is the true meaning of things, that kind of understanding between you and the person that you love, that makes the duty the carrier of what there is between you. So it's like a kind of being compassion and being a person who is giving himself to what's beyond the sensuality that comes with that enjoyment in the beginning, and to be open in that relation, not to hide anything, and to be very clear and honest in the way you live together. And so he is against these people who are just shopping around for a lot of sensual pleasures all the time. They will never rest and they will never get satisfied by that way of living. And so he's also against the people who settle down on the surface but are hunting these kind of sensualities beneath the surface, like behind the backs of their loved ones or families, or the things that's really surrounding them of duties and goodness. The only way is to be stable and to take on your duty as the person who had entered a relationship and a life that is built on that relationship. So you have a duty that you have to love. So you have the love for the duty as the duty of love. And this is part of what Kierkegaard is talking about here in Either Or in his book from B's papers. So we are now in B's papers. In the beginning, we had this Victor Eremita who said, well, I found these papers in my drawer. There is this A who's been writing something about his life and how fluctuous it was. And then now we have the B character who's talking about the big thing is not this or that in its measures, but in your choice of being loyal to what you have and taking the duty on you in that sense that gives you the deeper meaning. And so it's totally another way of looking at how you live your life and how you get through the levels of becoming yourself. And this is beautiful because actually he's just stating what most people would go through in a lifetime. but still it seems like truth that has been hidden from our eyes for so long that we could not really see in the modern times, at least, that we had the possibility of being one of these two, or we know stories of people or from ourselves that has went on both these journeys and maybe combined them or tried to combine them if somebody can find a way to do that. And basically it's just about choosing the duty over the fluctuous way of living here and there, and following your sensuality all the time. So you have like to stop up and live with that duty and the norms, and choosing to be responsible in another word. And that choice will give you the ability to make good judgments of what's good and not, and stop on the line of the duty, not exceeding it. Things become meaningful and not just meaningless, in that sense that the first person has it that, well, it doesn't matter anyway. Well, I'm living on the sensuality and the pleasure and chasing it all the time. Here, this guy is really concerned about making things matter and living with them. And we are here in a person that very much seems to us like that ethical religious person who's living on traditions and feeling that he has made the right choice over the wrong one, and not letting his choice take him away to all these kind of places that will never satisfy him, but he will settle down and be the person living in a way that will make deeper sense. And that's why I call him the ethical person. And so we can sum up that the meaning of either or, the title of Soren Kierkegaard's book from 1843 that really put him on the stage as an author and writer and philosopher. Well, he's not saying you have to choose between either the sensuality or the ethical person. He's saying that either you just indulge yourself in not really choosing yourself, choosing to be, or you go making that choice of saying, well, I want to choose being, and becoming aware of myself, and having this awareness surrounds me and lifting me up. And so it's not about being number A or B, but it's about A, B, or go on that journey of becoming who you are and understanding that personality that's inside you. It's like becoming aware of creativity in your life, to go and make some kind of fulfillment in the life. It seems very modern to us today to listen to these words, because a lot of psychologists has picked these things up later and has also found their way to them later, maybe with or without knowing about his books. But it's kind of that the human becomes the center of the process of becoming who he is, or understanding himself. It's like when we talk about self-realization, authenticity, self-fulfillment, and these type of ideas today. This is what he's actually working himself around to get to through these descriptions of the many people. And it can be very enjoyable reading about these many types of people, how they go on live their life, and especially these two types that has filled so much, both in his personal life, he has been both, but also that kind of person that everyone else could have been. And many times we can see that this is where the book actually maybe ended. This is the discussion between these two type of personalities and which way to go. And you can see that it's not like that new guy, the ethic is the judge is the Assessor Wilhelm is better than the first one who's living on sensuality and being a seducer. It's just like being a fossil in the other side, and that's why he in the end ends up having a third voice, talking about being the religious person, the true finder of himself by understanding that we're always wrong when it comes to God, and that kind of passion is the third one. And it seems very strange for many people today, because, well, we like the first two ones, we can recognize them in reality, but the third one is also present, and it's very, very beautiful that he has this third voice in, we can call C, in these correspondence. And it is like these A's papers and B's papers are kind of correspondence between each other that this Victor Eremita has found and is looking into and wanting to understand on their own premises. And he uses a lot of names and people there, and he sometimes waves a little to this side, a little to that side, and as many philosophers want also to say this on one hand, but also like be cautious not to say it too one-folded. It's like, oh yeah, but he could also have part of his personality demonstrating something else. So basically the book is like giving you the choices of being and not being, and what kind of being you are. And so you have the third person calling you to go into depths, because religious being is like the way to the deeper layers of psyche and understanding what you are inside you and really becoming in a way closer to yourself. It's a long talk and I went on for so long, but well, this is where he ends after his first trip and second trip and coming from Berlin. And so he published this book that becomes a cornerstone in his writings and understanding, self-understanding, but also in the kind of personal psychology and of existence that he is trying to put forward. And it's a long book with a lot of names and a lot of small talks and situations. And so it's not easy to relate to it, in my opinion, and maybe in the opinion of really many. But at the same time, it seems exciting to try to go through and try to understand how this unfolding is going on. And we have to remember that his books, especially these first ones, came out under pseudonyms that people did not really recognize the author behind them, but kept talking about them. And when this book was published in 43 and then later the second layer in 49, they were sold out and people could relate to them, relate to the stories in them. It's like a kind of shattering book for that society that had the ability to read and understand what's going on in these circles that he's describing, and that type of personalities that they could recognize in themselves. And that's why it became like a, I don't know if I can say like a pop culture literature. It's like something in the time and something that talks to the minds, not only by talking to them about the pleasures and indulging in it or criticizing it from the other side with morals and preachers, but he's like putting life on the scene as it can be lived and calling people to choose themselves and to choose to live truly within this work and this talk, and at the same time speaking to his love, Regina, and he's also speaking about himself at the same time. So there are many layers and complications in this type of books. Well, yeah, we can stop here because next time his life will go more quiet and he will live some time of without really a big noise. There is another book that was published in 1842 called Fear and Tremblance, and maybe I can get around that as well, and several other issues that happened at that time afterwards.